Welcome to Revenge and Justice, where betrayal finally meets its reckoning. We share powerful first-person stories of men who were underestimated, betrayed, and pushed too far by family business partners and the people they trusted most. If you believe respect must be earned and betrayal always has a price, you've found your home. And now, today's story.
40 people watched my son take the microphone in the dining room my father built in 1961. And I was still wearing the apron. Nobody had told me to take it off. Nobody had thought about it at all. I had come out of the kitchen because Paisley asked me to, and I had come out with flour still gray in the creases of my knuckles, and I stood at the edge of the group while the photographer counted us into position. Then my daughter-in-law put her hand up between me and the camera. She did it gently. That is the part I want you to understand. She did not push me. She touched my forearm the way you touch a chair you are moving out of a doorway, and she guided me 2 steps to the left out of the frame, and she smiled at the photographer the entire time. And Cain said it without lowering his voice. "Go wait in the back, Dad. This isn't your restaurant anymore." 40 people heard him. I counted the ones who looked at the floor. There were 3 who opened their mouths and thought better of it, and I remember exactly where each of them was standing, and I have never held it against any of them because I did not say anything either. I nodded once. I walked through the swinging door into the kitchen, and the noise dropped behind me the way it always did, the way it had every night for 51 years, and the ovens were still ticking as they cooled. I untied the apron. I did not throw it. I laid it flat against my chest and folded it the way Catherine used to fold it when she was alive and had nothing better to do on a Sunday, and I smoothed it once with the flat of my hand. Then I hung it on my father's hook. There are 4 hooks on that wall. The one nearest the door is the one Amias used for 37 years, and it is a 1/4 inch lower than the others because he set it himself in 1961, and he never was good with a level. I put my apron on it. I straightened the strap. Then I went out the back door into the parking lot, and the January air came off the lake and went straight through my shirt, and I did not go back inside. Nobody in that room knew I had signed the papers 11 days earlier. Nobody knew I had paid for every square foot of that evening, the floor they were standing on, the black paint, the lights they were smiling under. And nobody knew that I was the one who had asked the bank to keep it a secret. 4 days earlier, at 5:10 in the morning, I was feeding the starter the way I had every morning since I was 22 years old. The kitchen was 34 degrees warmer than the street. I know that because I checked both the way I always did the wall thermometer by the walk-in and the little one Jacob hung outside the delivery door in 1999 and never took down. 11 below out there. State Street had that hard blue color it gets when the snow has been on the ground long enough to stop being weather and start being furniture. I brought the jar out of the walk-in and set it on the steel. You do not stir a starter first thing. You look at it. You look at the rise line on the glass from the day before, and you look at the color of the water that is separated on top, and you smell it before you touch it. 65 years that jar had been alive. My father started it with flour and water and nothing else in the spring of 1961, 3 weeks before he opened the doors. And he fed it twice a day until the morning he died in 98. And I fed it twice a day after that, and there had not been one day in between when nobody fed it. Not the week Catherine was in the hospital. Not the day of my father's funeral. Jacob did it that day. He did not ask, he just did it, and he never mentioned it again. And that is the entire reason I trusted him with what I trusted him with later. I poured off the gray water. I took out 200 grams by feel because you learn to stop trusting the scale. The scale tells you what the flour weighs. It does not tell you what the room is doing to it, or what the water did overnight, or whether the cold came through the wall on State Street the way it comes through every January. So you use your hands. You press, and the dough tells you. That morning it told me the truth before anybody said it out loud. It was slack. It gave too easily. 65 years that starter had been alive, and it was the first morning it felt like something that had stopped trying. I did not think about it for long. I had 4 days. Then I heard the drill. It was coming from the dining room, and it was the wrong sound entirely. We had never had a drill going in that room during service prep, not once, not in 51 years, and it took me a second to place what I was hearing, because my brain kept filing it under something outside, something on the street, somebody else's problem. I set the jar down. I wiped my hands on the front of the apron. I went to the swinging door and pushed it open with my shoulder, and I stood there for a moment, and I looked at what my son was doing to the wall. There were 2 men on ladders, and my father's sign was already hanging by one screw. It was walnut. He cut it himself out of a plank he took off a job site on Parade Street in the fall of 1960, back when he was still pouring concrete for a living, and he carved the letters with a chisel over 4 evenings at the kitchen table while my mother told him he was making a mess. Sampson's. Nothing else on it. No year, no phone number, no cute little slice of pizza in the corner. He did not believe in telling people more than they needed. I stood in the doorway and watched the last screw come out. The sign dropped maybe 4 inches before the man on the left caught it, and it made a sound I had never heard it make, a flat wooden knock against the drywall. And then they had it down, and they were turning it sideways to get it through the gap between the ladders. "Careful with the edge," I said. "It splits along the grain." The man nearest me looked at Paisley before he looked at me. "That is a small thing. I want to be fair about it. He was 26 years old, and he was being paid by somebody, and he checked with the person who was paying him. But I had been standing in that room since before his parents met, and he looked at her first, and I noticed it, and I have thought about that half-second more times than it deserves." Paisley was over by the window with a woman I did not know, a designer from Pittsburgh who had driven up that morning. They had swatches laid out on table 4, black charcoal, and something they kept calling bone. "Where's it going?" I asked. "Storage," Paisley said. She did not look up from the swatches. "For now." "I'll take it home." "Let's keep everything together, Edwin. We may want it later." She turned a swatch 90 degrees and looked at it again. "It's good legacy asset. It's just not the current read." I did not know what that meant. I still do not, entirely. But I understood the shape of it, the way you understand a dog is about to bite even if you have never seen that particular dog. The designer asked her something about the wall behind the register, and Paisley answered without stopping. And then she said to the designer, not to me, in the same tone she had been using about the paint, "The dough guy can show you where the old vents are." The dough guy. I was 4 feet away. She was not being cruel. That is the part I have never been able to make anybody understand when I tell this. She was not lowering her voice. She was not hiding it. There was no meanness in her face at all. She had simply stopped counting me as somebody who could hear. I showed the designer where the old vents were. Then I went back and stood by the ladders while they carried the sign toward the back. And when they lifted it over the corner of table 2, a piece came off the bottom edge. Not a big piece, about the size of my thumb from the underside of the S, where the grain runs out, and my father had cut against it because he did not know any better in 1960. It hit the floor and skidded and stopped against the leg of a chair. Nobody bent down for it. The men had the sign. The designer was talking about sightlines from the door. So I bent down, and my knee made the noise it makes now, and I picked it up. It was warm. That is not possible, and I know it is not possible, and I am telling you it was warm because it had been on a wall above a pizza oven for 65 years, and I think the wood remembered. I put it in my shirt pocket, next to the pencil. I have carried a pencil in that pocket every working day of my life. My father did too. He wrote the day's numbers in a ledger in pencil, never in pen, and when I asked him why, once, when I was about 11, and thought I was being clever, he said, "Pencil you can fix. Ink is a promise." That is the entire conversation. That is the longest piece of advice I ever got from him. They took the sign through the kitchen and out to the storeroom in the back, and I gave them 10 minutes, and then I followed. The storeroom is not really a room. It is a walled-off section of the old loading bay, unheated, with a bare bulb and a shelf of number 10 cans, and the mop sink that has not drained right since the Clinton administration. They had leaned the sign against the back wall, behind a stack of flattened boxes. Face out, at least. I will give them that. Face out. I moved the boxes. It was cold enough in there that I could see my own breath going across the letters, and the light from the bulb came in at a bad angle, and for the first time in my life, I was looking at that sign from below instead of from underneath a hot oven with my hands full. You could see the chisel marks. On a wall 12 feet up, under warm light, it reads clean. Up close, it is not clean at all. The N is deeper on one side than the other. The apostrophe is slightly crooked. There is a spot on the second S where he went too hard and had to sand it back, and you can still see the dish in the wood where he tried to make it disappear. I put 2 fingers on it. 51 years I worked under that sign, and I had never once touched the front of it. Out in the dining room, somebody started the drill again, and behind me, through the wall, I could hear my son laughing at something the designer said. He was sitting at table 6 when I came back through the kitchen, and he had a folder in front of him. And that is how I knew it was going to be a conversation and not a talk. Table 6 is the one by the radiator. 2 top wobbles on the back left leg has wobbled since about 2009. It is where my father used to do the books at 11 at night with a beer he never finished, and it is where I used to do the books after him and Cain had picked it without knowing any of that, the way you pick a table when you need a table. Sit down a minute, Dad. I sat down. My knee was still complaining from the storeroom floor. He had a laptop open beside the folder, and he turned it a few degrees toward me and then turned it back, which told me the thing on the screen was not actually for me to look at. He does that. He has done it since he was 9 years old and used to show me report cards from an angle. So the relaunch is Friday, he said. Friday. Friday night, 6:30 for press 7 for guests. He tapped the folder without opening it. Dane's flying in, which is a big deal. That's not a maybe anymore, that's confirmed, so everything has to be tight. I waited to see if there was a question coming. There was not. There's some operational changes I want to walk you through, he said. Before Friday, so there's no surprises. Operational changes. I want to be precise here because it matters. Cain does not talk like that. Cain grew up in a kitchen where the vocabulary was hot, cold, walk in, 86, and behind you. When he was 24, he called a food rep a name I will not repeat in this telling, and the man deserved it. He has a mouth on him, or he did. Somewhere in the last 2 years, he had swapped it out for a different one, and I could hear the seams. Go ahead, I said. So, mornings. We're moving you to a 3-day rotation, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, prep only. I open 6 days. You open 6 days. He said it kindly. That is the strange part. He said it the way a doctor says a thing he has said 40 times that week. The new model has the ovens firing later. There's no reason for anybody to be in that building at 5 in the morning. It's not efficient, and honestly, Dad, it's not good for you either. Paisley and I talk about it. You're 73. I know how old I am. I'm just saying nobody expects it. I looked at the folder. It stayed closed the entire time we talked. I have wondered since whether there was anything in it at all. Second thing, he said, front of house. We're going to keep you back of house exclusively, kitchen side. I've never been front of house. I've been in the kitchen 51 years. Right, but you come out. You come out and you talk to the regulars, and that was great. That was the old thing. But Friday, there's going to be press, and there's going to be photos, and the whole point of the rebrand is a clean look. A clean look. I did not ask him what was unclean. I have thought about the fact that I did not ask him a great deal since. He was 30 inches away from me, and he had a napkin under his water glass because Paisley had trained him to, and there was a piece of his mother in the shape of his jaw that I could see from that angle and could not see from any other, and I did not ask him. All right, I said. He blinked. He had come to that table braced for something, I think, and I had not given it to him, and for about a second and a half, he did not know what to do with his hands. I appreciate you being flexible, he said. One question. Sure. The starter. He looked at me. The jar, I said. In the walk-in, second shelf back left behind the sheet pans. I know what the starter is, Dad. Twice a day. Morning and close. It's not a preference, it's a schedule. If it goes a day, it doesn't die, it just stops being what it is. I put my hands flat on the table. Who's feeding it on Wednesday? And here's the thing. He did not hesitate. If he had hesitated, if he had said, "Let me think about that," if he had said, "Write it down for me," everything after would have gone a different way, and I would be telling you a different story. He said, "We're keeping it, obviously." Obviously? That's not what I asked. Dad. He almost laughed. He picked up the folder and squared it against the edge of the table once, twice. It's the whole thing, right? 65 years, 3 generations. That's the story. That's literally on the wall in the new copy. Paisley wrote a whole paragraph about it. Nobody is touching the starter. Who feeds it? Somebody feeds it. Jacob feeds it. It gets fed. He stood up and he was smiling, and the smile was for a room that was not there yet. You worry about the wrong things. That's always been your thing, you know that. He went back toward the office with the folder under his arm, and he stopped halfway and said without turning around, "Wear the gray shirt Friday, not the apron." Then he was gone, and it was just me and the radiator, which had started its knocking the way it does around 3. 4 days until the relaunch. I sat at my father's table with my hands still flat on the wood, and I did the arithmetic I had been doing for a week and a half, and it came out the same as it always did. 11 days. Zion Man has had the same office on Peach Street for 31 years, and he has never once offered me coffee because he knows I do not drink it after 9 in the morning, and he has known that since the Reagan administration. He had the documents laid out in 2 rows when I came in, 7 of them. He does not stack paper. "Sit," he said. I sat. Outside his window there is a parking lot and a chain-link fence, and beyond that the back of a tire shop, and that view has not changed in 3 decades, and I have always liked him for not moving somewhere with a better one. "Before we start," he said, "I'm going to ask you a question, and then I'm going to ask you the same question again at the end, and I want you to know now that I'm going to do that so you don't think I'm being clever. Ask it." "Are you sure?" "Yes." That was fast. "I've had 16 months. He looked at me over the top of his glasses. "Zion is 66, and he does not raise his voice, and I have watched him take apart men half his age in a conference room without ever getting above the volume you would use to ask for the salt." "All right," he said. "Then let's go through what you actually own, because in my experience, people sign things they don't understand even when they wrote them." He went down the list. "The building at State and West 12th held outright since 1978, no mortgage, taxes current. The parcel behind it that my father bought in 66 for the delivery bay. The equipment, which is worth less than the scrap value of the ovens, and I have always found that funny. 2 accounts, one of which Cain has never known about. And then the last one, the mark," Zion said. "The what?" "The name. Sampson's. Registered with the Patent and Trademark Office in September of 1994. Class 43 Restaurant Services Registrant, Edwin Sampson." He turned the page around so I could see it. "Renewed on schedule every 10 years. The last renewal went through 4 years ago. My office filed it. You signed it in this room and you probably don't remember doing it." I did not remember doing it. "Has it ever been assigned?" he said. "Transferred, licensed, sold, gifted, anything?" "No." "Has anyone ever asked you to assign it?" "No." He wrote something in the margin in his own hand. He writes in pen. "We have argued about it." "Then it's yours," he said. "Not the restaurants, not the LLCs, yours personally, the same way your wedding ring was yours." He let that sit for a second. "I want you to hold on to that sentence, Edwin. There's going to be a day when it matters, and you're going to want to have already heard it." Then he slid the first document across. I took the pencil out of my shirt pocket and I signed my name in pencil. He did not say anything. He has watched me do this for 31 years. I sign in pencil first on every page, and then I go back over it in ink. And I do it because my father did it, and my father did it because you can fix a pencil, and ink is a promise. Zion has never once told me it was unnecessary. He just waits. 7 pages, 14 signatures if you count them the way I count them. The notary came in from the front office, a young woman with a stamp and a sticker book, and she watched the last 4, and she left, and the door clicked, and it was quiet in there. The way a room gets quiet when something has just been made real. Here's what these do, Zion said. In plain language, and then I'll say it again in the language the court would use, and you tell me if the two versions sound like the same thing to you. Go ahead. Plain, you are pulling your name off the thing you put your name on 16 months ago. 30 days from the day you tell me to file, the bank stops having you standing behind that loan. What happens after that is between the bank and the borrower, and you are no longer in the room. And the other version, notice of withdrawal of a third-party guarantee effective upon the expiration of the contractual notice period with no admission of prior obligation beyond the four corners of the instrument. He took his glasses off. They sound like the same thing to me. Do they sound like the same thing to you? Yes. Good, because they are. And I need you to understand that I am not doing anything sneaky, and neither are you. He put the glasses back on. Now, some paperwork has more than one signature on it, Edwin. Some of it has more than one signature on it, and only one of the people who signed knows that. I looked at him. I'm not going to say more than that today, he said. I'm saying it because it's true, and because you are the kind of man who wants to be told the shape of a thing before he has to look at it. Zion. Second time, he said. Are you sure? The radiator in his office is louder than mine. I listened to it for a while. Out in the lot behind the tire shop, somebody was trying to start a truck, and it turned over twice and caught on the third, and I heard it pull away. Yes, I said. He gathered the 7 documents, tapped them square, and stood up. The safe is behind him in the wall, behind a print of the Bicentennial Tower that somebody gave him in the 90s, and he has never had the heart to take down. He swung the print aside. He worked the dial. Then he stopped with the door open and his hand still on it, and he stood there longer than a man needs to stand in front of an open safe. There's something else in here, he said. It's been in here for 29 years and it isn't mine. He brought it out with both hands, which is not how you carry an envelope. It was manila, the small kind, and the glue had gone brown along the flap, the way glue does when nobody has touched it in a long time. There was one line on the front written in pencil, in handwriting I would know in a dark room. For Edwin, when the time comes. 1997, Zion said. March. He came in here on a Tuesday without an appointment, which he had never done, and he sat where you're sitting, and he gave me that, and he gave me one instruction. I did not take it yet. He held it out, and I did not take it. He said if Edwin ever has to choose between the restaurant and the boy, give him this. Zion's voice did not change at all. Then he asked me what he owed me. I said nothing, this isn't legal work. He put $20 on the desk anyway and left. $20. It's still in the file. My father died 14 months after that, in February of '98, in the walk-in on a Sunday morning, with a case of tomatoes half lifted. He was 81. He had fed the starter 40 minutes before, and I know that because the jar was on the steel table with the lid off, and I have never in 28 years been able to decide whether that detail is a comfort or the other thing. Did he tell you what's in it? No. Did you ever look? Zion put the envelope down on the desk between us and sat back in his chair. Edwin, he said, I have been your lawyer for 31 years, and I want you to think about the question you just asked me, and then I want you to decide whether you actually want an answer or whether you want to go back to the part where you were sure about things. That is the closest Zion man has ever come to being angry with me. I picked it up. It weighed almost nothing. A single sheet, maybe 2. I turned it over and the back was blank, and I turned it again and looked at the line on the front, and I looked at the way he had crossed the T in the word time, which he did with a short, hard stroke that always came out slightly above where it should have been. 28 years I have looked for that man's handwriting and things. Receipts, margins of the ledger, the back of a photograph, I have found it maybe 40 times, and I remember every one. I did not open it. I want to tell you there was a reason. I have had a long while to build one, and I have several available, and none of them are true, so here is the true one instead. He never once told me I did a good job. Not when I took over the ovens at 19. Not the year we cleared more than he ever had. Not at my wedding, not when Cain was born, not the night we stayed open through the blizzard in '77 and fed half the fire department for free. He would come in the next morning and look at the room and nod at the floor and go put his apron on. So there were two things in that envelope, and only one of them could be there. Either it said the sentence and I would have to hold 28 years of not hearing it in one hand at the same time, or it did not say the sentence and I would know. I put it in my shirt pocket, next to the pencil and the piece of walnut. Zion watched me do it, and he did not say one word about it then or later. And I have thought about that too. 16 months before any of this, Cain came through the kitchen door at 4 in the afternoon with a letter in his hand, and he was walking fast. They said yes. He had the envelope open and folded back on itself, first keystone letterhead, and he was holding it up like a fish he had caught. 190,000. Approved. He had been turned down twice, and he had not told me about either time, and I had known about both, and neither of us had ever said so. "Read it," he said. "Read the number." I read the number. And here is the part I have gone back to more than any other single moment in this whole business. Not the microphone, not the sign. This. He called me Dad. He had been calling me Ed for about 2 years by then. It started as a joke in front of somebody, and then it just stayed the way those things do, and I never asked him to stop because asking would have made it a thing. But that afternoon in the kitchen with the letter, he said, "Dad." They said yes, and I stood there. I did not say congratulations right away. I have been told since by the one person who was in a position to notice that the pause was about 3 seconds long. 3 seconds is nothing. 3 seconds is how long it takes to slide a pizza off a peel. In those 3 seconds, I had my mouth open, and I had the whole thing sitting right there on my tongue. So, it was me. I went in on a Thursday, and I signed my name behind yours because they were never going to give it to you, and I could not watch you get told no a third time. Then I closed my mouth, and I said, "That's great," and I shook his hand, and his hand was sweating. He went out front to call Paisley. I sat in my car in the lot behind the tire shop for a while before I drove anywhere. My father was dead 28 years. I had spent all of them waiting to hear one sentence from him, and now it was folded up in my shirt pocket 6 inches under my collarbone, and I could feel the corner of it against my chest when I breathed, and I could not make myself open it. Jacob Palacios lives on Wallace Street, in a house his wife's father built, and the porch light was on because the porch light is always on. I knocked at 9. I had the jar inside my coat against my chest because it was 11 degrees, and you do not carry a starter through that kind of cold in a bag. He opened the door in a t-shirt. 58 years old, and the man does not own a sweater. "Edwin, can I come in a minute?" He stepped back. That was the whole conversation about whether I could come in. Their kitchen is small, and there was a radio on low, the AM station out of Buffalo that plays nothing but old baseball talk in the off-season. His wife was upstairs. I heard the floor move once, and then not again, and I understood from that she had decided to stay up there, and I was grateful to her for it. I took the jar out of my coat and set it on the table. It is a quart jar, the kind with the wire bail, and I had wrapped a rubber band around it at the fill line the way I do. Inside, about 2 cups of it, hooded and quiet from the cold. Jacob looked at it for a while. "That's not the one," he said. "No. That's off the one. I split it Thursday. It's been fed 4 times. It's awake." He pulled out a chair and sat down across from it, and he did not touch it, which is exactly what I would have done. "Back of the second shelf," I said. "In your refrigerator, not the door. The door swings and it wakes it up, twice a day. Morning when you get up and again before bed. It doesn't have to be by the clock. It has to be twice." "How much?" "Equal weight. One of those coffee scoops level and the same again of water. Water sits out overnight first. There's chlorine in the city line and it will not kill it, but it will make it lazy." "Flour." "Unbleached. Only unbleached." I said it twice because it is the only part I would not have forgiven myself for saying once. The bleached will feed it for about a week, and then it goes flat and sour and it never comes back right. It doesn't die on you, that's the problem with it. It just stops being what it was and you don't notice until you can't fix it. "Unbleached," he said. "Got it." If it separates and the water on top is gray, that's fine, pour it off. If it's pink, you throw the whole thing out and you call me. Pink. You'll know pink. He took a pencil out of the drawer and wrote it on the back of a gas bill in that squared-off way of his, all capitals the way he writes prep lists. While he was writing, I said the other part. Nobody knows about this jar. He kept writing. Not the crew, I said. Not Paisley. Not Cain. He finished the line he was on. He put the pencil down. Cain, he said. Especially. Jacob Palacios has worked for me for 22 years. He came in off a bad year and a worse divorce and asked for dish, and inside 4 months he could read an oven better than men I had trained for a decade. When my father died, Jacob fed the starter that Sunday. Nobody asked him to. He never brought it up again, not once in 28 years, and that is the entire reason I was standing in his kitchen. He did not ask me why. I want to say that again, because I think about it. A man I employ at 9 at night in his own house, and I hand him a jar and tell him to hide it from his employer's son. And he did not ask me why. He folded the gas bill and put it under the salt shaker. Then he said one thing. You going somewhere? The radio said something about a pitcher's elbow. Upstairs, the floor moved again and settled. Not yet, I said. He waited. I just don't want this thing depending on whether I'm still there. Something went across his face that I did not have a name for that night. It was not surprise. It might have been the opposite of surprise. Okay, he said. He got a dish towel and wrapped the jar in it, which I had not thought to do, and which was the right thing to do, and he put it on the back of the second shelf, and he moved a carton to make room, and then moved it back to keep the jar out of the air from the vent. Small things. He has always done the small things. 4:40, he said, closing the door. What? Friday. The ovens. He shrugged. New schedule says 6. Deck ovens that size, you fire them at 6, you're pulling underbaked at 7:30 in front of the newspaper. I'll go in at 4:40. You're not on the schedule at 4:40. No, he said. I'm not. I walked home. 6 blocks, and I could have driven, and I did not. The plows had been through State Street, and the piles at the corners were up past the parking meters and gone gray on top. Somebody had put a plastic chair in a shoveled parking spot to hold it, which is a thing people do in this town, and which my wife thought was hilarious for 39 years. I walked past the restaurant. The windows were papered over for the paint. You could see the light behind the paper, and a shape moving, and I did not stop, and I did not slow down, and I got to my door with my ears burning from the cold and my chest empty in a way that had nothing to do with the walk. The reporter found me by the ice machine, which tells you something about how the evening was arranged. Bria Schwartz, business desk at the Times News 33, or thereabouts, and she had come in through the kitchen because the front was jammed with people holding wine in plastic cups. She had a spiral notebook. I had not seen a reporter use paper in 15 years. Mr. Sampson, I'm doing the piece on the relaunch. She got the notebook open against her forearm. Can I ask you about the original 1961, is that right? What was here before your father took it? Nobody had asked me a question all week. I want to be honest about what that did. A woman I had never met asked me one straightforward thing about my own family, and I felt something come up in my chest that I did not particularly want to examine, and I put my hand on the ice machine to have somewhere to put it. It was a shoe repair, I said. Kalinowski's. He had it 30 years, and his son didn't want it, and my father... He came in fast from my left. That is not how I meant to write that sentence, but that is how it happened, so I am leaving it. Cain came in fast from my left, with his hand already out toward her. Cain Sampson, I'm the owner, so good of you to come. He shook her hand for slightly too long. Dad, you're needed in back, I think. He was answering a question, Bria said. Sure. So the space. He turned his shoulder maybe 15 degrees, and 15 degrees is all it takes. My grandfather opened here in 1959, so we're looking at 66 years, 3 generations, which honestly in this industry is unheard of. 59. It was 61. He opened the doors on the 11th of April, 1961, a Tuesday, and the reason I can tell you it was a Tuesday is that my father wrote it in the ledger in pencil, and I have read that page more times than I have read anything else in my life. Cain was 2 years off on the one number that is the whole thing. Bria's pen stopped. Not for long, maybe a half second, the way a pen stops when the person holding it hears something land wrong. She looked at me, just her eyes, not her head. I had the correction in my mouth. 61. One word. And I did not say it. I have gone over the reason, and I do not like any version of it. The polite version is that I did not want to embarrass him in front of press on his night. The true version is closer to this. I have corrected that boy on flour and on ovens and on money for 41 years, and every single time it cost me something. And somewhere in there I made a decision I never announced to myself, which was that I would rather be wrong in public than be right at him one more time. So Bria wrote 59 in her notebook. She underlined it, though. I saw her underline it. She underlined it and put a small mark beside it that I could not read from where I was standing. And then she asked Cain something about square footage, and he answered at length. Dane Williamson came in around 6:45. You could tell the room shifted. He was not a large man, and he was not loud. Gray coat, no tie, the kind of quiet that costs money. And Paisley was on him inside 4 seconds. She walked him along the wall where they had put up the new copy in vinyl lettering, and she talked and he read, and once he stopped and read a line twice. The line said, 65 years, one starter, no shortcuts. She had written that. I had read it in a proof 3 weeks earlier, and I had not said anything about that either. I stood at the kitchen end of the room in a gray shirt with the collar buttoned, feeling the way you feel in a shirt you do not wear, and Jacob went past me with a sheet tray and said without turning his head, "Ovens are right." That was the last normal thing anybody said to me that night. At 6:50, Paisley started assembling the photograph. She did it well. That is not sarcasm. She has a real skill, and I have never pretended otherwise. She moved 11 people into a shape in about 90 seconds without any of them feeling moved the servers in front of the 2 cousins from Pittsburgh who had driven up Dane at the edge where he could decline to be in it if he wanted, Cain's center, with the microphone he did not need for a room that size. "Edwin," she said, "come out here, we need you." We need you. I came out from the kitchen end. I still had flour in the creases of my knuckles because I had been in the walk-in 20 minutes earlier checking a thing I did not need to check, and I came out and stood at the left edge of the group next to a server named Delia, who has worked Saturdays for 6 years and who smiled at me and moved over to make room. The photographer raised the camera and said something about counting the 3, and Paisley's hand came up between me and the lens. 30 seconds before he said it, my son told a joke that did not work. I have never included this part when I have told this to anybody, and I left it out every time because it makes him smaller, and I did not want him smaller. But it is the reason, so here it is. Dane Williamson had asked him something about the ovens. Reasonable question, the kind a man asks when he is deciding whether to put money into a thing. What kind of deck, what year, what does it cost you to run? And Cain said, "Honestly, ask the guy who talks to them." He meant me. He said it looking at me and he smiled, and he waited for the laugh. Dane did not laugh. He did the thing that is worse than not laughing, which is that he nodded politely and looked back at the ovens and said, "Deck or conveyor?" Cain said deck, and his ears went red. That is the whole event. 4 seconds. Nobody in that room registered it except the 2 men involved and me. And I have thought since that if Dane had given him a courtesy laugh, one single breath of a laugh, the rest of my life would have gone differently. Then Paisley called us into the photograph, and her hand came up between me and the lens, and she walked me 2 steps left and out of it, and she was still smiling at the photographer. And Cain said the thing. I am not going to write it again. It is at the top of this, and you have it. What I will tell you is what the room did, because the room is the part that stayed with me. Nothing. 40 people, and not one sound. Not a gasp. That is television. The air went out of the conversation the way it goes out of a house when a furnace shuts off, and everybody kept holding their plastic cups, and Delia looked at the floor with her whole face, and one of the cousins from Pittsburgh said, "Okay," very quietly to nobody. Bria Schwartz stopped writing. That is the detail I would give you if you only let me keep one. She had been taking notes all night on square footage on the paint color on the vinyl lettering. My son told his father to go wait in the back in front of a newspaper, and the reporter stopped writing and she put the notebook down against her leg. Some things you do not take notes on. She knew that in the half second it took, and I have had a soft spot for that woman ever since. I nodded once and I went through the swinging door. The kitchen was full of light and empty of people. Everybody was out front. There was a hotel pan of dough balls on the bench with a damp cloth over them. 16 of them, and I stood there and counted them because that is what my hands do. The ovens were at temperature. Jacob had them right the way he said he would. And on the low shelf under the pass where nobody puts anything because it is awkward to reach, there was a quart jar. The original. Paisley had wanted it out where people could see it next to a little card, and at some point somebody had needed the counter space and put it under the pass, out of the way. Lid on tight. Full sun off the oven mouth hitting the side of the glass. I picked it up. It was warm. Not warm like the walnut, not a thing I was imagining. Warm like a jar that has been sitting 8 feet from a 500-degree deck oven for 4 hours with the lid clamped down. I opened it and let the pressure off, and it sighed at me. I put it back in the walk-in myself, second shelf back left, behind the sheet pans. I wiped the ring off the glass with my thumb. Then I stood in the cold of the walk-in for a while with the door open on my back, in a gray shirt with the collar buttoned, and I did not cry. And I want that on the record because I have been asked, and the honest answer is that I have never in my life cried in a kitchen, and I was not going to start in that one. I took off the apron I was not wearing. That is a joke, and it is not a very good one, but it is the only one I have got about that night, and my wife would have laughed at it out of charity. I hung the apron on my father's hook. I went out the delivery door. The lot was empty except for the cars, and the cars had 4 inches on them because it had started again while we were all inside pretending, and the light over the door has been out since November, and I had told 3 people about it. I got in my car, and I sat with my hands on the wheel, and I did not start the engine. Then I took out my phone and I found the name and it rang twice, and Zion Man picked up at 7:19 on a Friday night, which means he was sitting somewhere with the phone next to him, which means he had been sitting somewhere with the phone next to him for 11 days. He did not say hello. He said Edwin, and I said 2 words, "File it." That was both of them. I had 11 days to think of something better, and that is what I came up with, and Zion Man did not need anything better. "All right," he said. I heard him move. A chair, then a drawer. "I'm going to tell you the calendar," he said, "because you're going to want to know it, and because after tonight, I am not going to call you every time something small happens. Do you have anything to write on?" I did not. I had a phone and a steering wheel and snow coming down through the cone of a streetlight 40 feet away. "Say it," I said. "I'll keep it." Monday morning, I file the notice with First Keystone. That's the 3rd. Their compliance desk logs it same day. That starts a 30-day window which puts the effective date at the 4th of next month. 30 days. 30 days. Between now and then, nothing happens. The loan performs, the payments come out the way they have for 15 months, and nobody at that restaurant knows anything is different. He paused. "That part is going to be harder on you than you think, Edwin. Watching nothing happen for a month is its own kind of work." What happens on the 4th? On the 4th, the guarantee lapses. On the 5th or 6th, the bank system flags the loan as undersecured and generates a letter. It's automatic. No human decides it. That letter goes to the borrower of record. Another pause, shorter. "It will not say your name." Why not? Guarantor identity isn't disclosed in default correspondence. It'll say withdrawal of third-party guarantee, give him a window to cure, and leave him to find out the rest for himself. I watched the snow. Then what? Then he calls the bank or he doesn't. If he calls a woman named Kylie Shaw, we'll tell him what she is permitted to, which is not much. And she will tell him to look at his own file. He let that sit. He has the file, Edwin. 15 months. It is in his house. He's never read it.
No, Zion said. He hasn't.
Somebody came out the front of the restaurant and stood on the sidewalk smoking 60 yards away, and I slid down 2 inches in the seat like a teenager, which, at 73, is not something I am proud of. One more thing, he said. I want to offer you something, and I want you to actually consider it instead of saying no in the first half second, which is what you are going to do. Go ahead. Let me call him. I'll say I represent his father. There's a matter regarding a loan guarantee, and there's a 30-day window during which the 2 of you could sit in a room. The man on the sidewalk finished his cigarette and went back in, and the door let out a rectangle of yellow light and took it back. He'd have a month, Zion said. He would know what was coming, and he would have a month to do something about it. And Edwin, whatever else he is, the only son you have got. Here is what I thought about. I thought about a boy at 7 on the back step of the old house with my shoes and a tin of polish, saying, "I'll do it, Dad. You go get ready." Nobody asked him. He did a terrible job, and I wore those shoes to a meeting with a bank. Then I thought about a man of 41 who had been told no twice by that same bank and never told his father, and who took the yes without one question about why the 3rd time was different. And I understood sitting in that car that I had put myself between that boy and every hard thing for 41 years, and that the only thing I had ever actually given him was a version of the world with the weight taken out of it. One phone call, 30 seconds. I could have. No, I said. Zion did not argue. He is not a man who argues once he has been answered. All right, he said. Then I'll file Monday. The apartment on West 8th is 2 rooms over a chiropractor's office, and it came furnished, which meant I brought almost nothing. 4 things. The jar which went in the refrigerator before my coat came off. The ledger my father's cloth bound, the corner gone soft. A handkerchief my wife folded which I have not unfolded, and a piece of walnut the size of my thumb. I put the last 3 on the windowsill in the order they came into my life. Walnut, 1960, ledger, 61, then the handkerchief. I moved them twice, getting it right. Then I stood there in a rented room at 8:30 at night, 73 years old, and I set an alarm on my phone for 5:10. There was no reason for it. There was no restaurant to go to.
At 5:10 in the morning, I got up and I fed the starter in a kitchen that was not mine, and the light over the sink hummed the way rented light does. And outside, on West 8th, the plow went by, and I stood there with a coffee scoop in my hand and 30 days in front of me and nothing at all to do with either one. 30 days is a long time to watch nothing happen.
I will not spend much of your time on them. I walked. I read 4 books, none of them well. I fed the starter twice a day, and I got my hair cut by a man on 18th who did not ask me a single question, which is why I have gone to him for 48 years. Twice I drove past the restaurant at closing and did not stop. Then it was the 4th, and then it was the 6th. And on the 6th, a letter went out of a machine at First Keystone with my son's name on it. I was not in that branch. Kylie Shaw handles the commercial accounts on Peach and has for 9 years, and there is a standing instruction in our file, put there 16 months ago at my request, that any material contact regarding that loan gets reported to Zion Mann's office. Zion got it at 11:40. He came in at 10 in the morning with the letter in his hand, unfolded, held out in front of him like it had a smell. He had read it 3 times in the car. He told her that. He said, "I've read this 3 times and I don't know what it says." Which part, Mr. Sampson? This part. Withdrawal of third-party guarantee. He put it on the counter and turned it around for her. There's no third party. It's my loan. She read it. She did not need to read it, but she read it, which is a kindness people who work at counters learn. Then she turned her monitor. That is the thing about Kylie Shaw. She turns the screen. She does not read it out to you, and she does not summarize it. She turns it around so you are looking at the same words she is looking at, and she puts one finger next to the line and she waits. Your note is a guaranteed instrument, she said. There's a guarantor of record. That party filed notice 30 days ago, and the notice took effect on the 4th. Who? I can't tell you that. It's my loan.
It's your note. The guarantee is a separate instrument between the bank and the guarantor. Her finger did not move off the line. Guarantor identity is confidential in this correspondence, per the request on file. Per the request on file. Cain did not hear it. He was looking at the screen. Zion heard it 2 hours later on the phone and did not say anything about it to me for 11 weeks. And when he finally did, he said it in a way I will get to. Then how am I supposed to find out? Your own origination file has the full instrument, she said. Every page. You received a copy at closing. Signature page, guarantee rider disclosure schedule. She sat back. Have you looked at it? He said, it's at the house. Which is not an answer to have you looked at it, and both of them knew it. Kylie Shaw is 44 years old, and she has a way of holding still that I am told is unnerving. She held still. And then she said the thing that ended it, and she said it without any weight on it at all, which is the only reason he could not defend himself against it. Mr. Sampson, your application was declined twice before it was approved. You don't remember? Zion said the room went quiet enough that she could hear the printer in the back. He remembered. Of course he remembered. A plastic chair in that branch in June, being told the debt service coverage was not there. The second time in August on the phone, 20 seconds, a young man reading a script. He had never told me about either one, and he never knew that I knew. What he had never done, not once in 15 months, was ask himself why the third one came back yes. He did not answer her. He picked the letter up off the counter and he said thank you because he was raised in my kitchen, and there are some things that stay in a man past where his thinking goes. And he walked out into the lot. He sat in his car for 22 minutes. The file was on the passenger seat. It had been on the passenger seat since he pulled it out of the closet at 6:30 that morning. An accordion folder with a rubber band around it. First Keystone printed on the flap. And he had brought it with him because he thought he might need to prove something. He did not open it. 22 minutes engine running in a bank parking lot on Peach Street with the whole of it sitting 18 inches from his right hand. I have never been able to decide whether that is the saddest thing in this story or the most human, and I have had time. He called at 6:15 in the morning, and he did not say hello. It's dead, and I laughed. One sound out of the middle of my chest, the kind of noise a man makes when he steps on a rake. It was in the room before I knew it was coming, and it stopped as fast, and then I was standing in a rented kitchen with my mouth open and nothing on the other end of the line. Jacob waited. He is good at that. I want to be honest about the laugh because I have thought about it more than most of what happened afterward. For 16 months, I had been carrying a thing I could not put down, and somebody finally dropped the other end of it, and my body made a sound before my life caught up. 30 seconds near enough. Then I said, what day? That's the question, isn't it? What day, Jacob? Tuesday, it was slow. Thursday, it smelled like a nail salon. A pause on his end and a sound behind him I did not place at first. This morning, there's a gray crust on it, and it doesn't come back with a feed. I fed it at 4:50 and again at 5:30, and there's nothing. Acetone smell is starvation. It wasn't starved, he said. It got fed twice a day every day since you left. I saw the marks on the calendar. There is a paper taped inside the walk-in door with the date and 2 boxes, morning and close, and whoever feeds it puts a line through the box. My father started that. It is the only management system that building has ever had. Who's been marking it? He has. I put my hand flat on the counter. Cain, Jacob said. Both boxes every day, 31 days. He has not missed one. Then what killed it? And Jacob, who is not a talker, took a breath the way a man does when he has already worked out the answer and does not enjoy having it. I went in the dry store Sunday, he said. 4 sacks of Kessler bleached on the pallet. Came in on the 12th. Whole order got switched over, cheaper by about $9 a bag. $9 a bag. He wouldn't have known, Jacob said. Same white powder, same paper sack. The bag says flour on it. He fed it every day, Jacob said. Twice. He never missed. He just didn't know what it eats. That is the sentence.
Out of everything anybody said to me across 4 months out of lawyers and bankers and a courtroom, that is the one I have carried. He fed it every day. He just didn't know what it eats. I looked at the refrigerator door, and I did not say anything for long enough that Jacob said my name once quietly to see if the line was still good.
Because I knew what I was hearing.
I had done it to him. 41 years of feeding a thing twice a day, faithfully, on schedule, never missing a box on the calendar with the wrong bag. Cheaper. Easier. Look the same in the sack. And it does not die on you. That is the whole trouble with it. It just quietly stops being what it was, and by the time anybody notices, there is a gray crust on it, and no feed brings it back. I had told Jacob that myself in his own kitchen 6 weeks earlier with my finger on a jar. I had said the words out loud, and I had not heard them. "Edwin, I'm here. You want me to keep trying warm spot 3 days sometimes?" "No, it's done." Then I heard the sound behind him again, and this time I placed it. A deck oven coming up. That ticking they do through the first 200 degrees, which you cannot hear over anything, and which you can hear over nothing. 6:15 in the morning, Jacob Palacios was in that building. I did not ask him about it. I had one thing in my hands already, and I did not have room for a second one. "Jacob." "Yeah." "Don't tell him you called me." "Wasn't going to," he said, and he hung up. I put the phone face down on the counter. Then I opened my refrigerator and stood there with the door wide and the cold coming out onto my feet, and on the back of the second shelf behind a carton there was a quart jar with a rubber band around the middle and a dish towel underneath that Jacob had put there, and I had not moved. 65 years old, awake, fed at 5:10 that morning by a man in a rented kitchen who had nowhere to be. I looked at it for a while. I did not take it out. I did not touch it. I closed the door and the light went off inside and the compressor came on the way they do, and I stood in that kitchen in the dark with my hand still on the handle. He tried for 6 days. I got most of this from Jacob, and some of it later from a woman with a notebook. The first thing he did was feed it. Twice the ratio warm water out on the counter, and he sat with it 2 hours that first night, and in the morning there was nothing on the glass, no rise line, gray water on top, and a smell like a hardware store. The second thing he did was feed it again. The third thing he did was call Buffalo. There are 2 old places out there, one in Black Rock and one on Hertel, and I have known both families 30 years. He did not know that. He called them cold and told the man on Hertel he was looking to buy a mature starter, and the man asked how mature. Cain said 65 years, and the man laughed. Not cruelly. This came back third hand through a supplier, and I am telling you that. But the man laughed, and then he said, "Son, you can't buy that. You can only be given that, and the people who have one aren't giving." He hung up on the second call before the guy could finish. Thursday night, Paisley found him in the office at 2 in the morning, watching a video on his laptop. Some fellow in Oregon with a beard and a well-lit kitchen explaining how to revive a neglected culture. She stood in the door and watched him watch it. Then she told him it was a jar of flour and water. I have gone back and forth over that sentence, whether it was cruelty or whether she genuinely could not see it, and I have come down on the second, which I find worse. To her, it was a container with paste in it, and her husband had not slept in 4 days over a container with paste in it, and she was worried about him in the way she knew how. He did not answer her. He put his headphones back on. Friday they opened at 11, and the dough was from a bag. They had gone to commercial yeast on Wednesday because there was no choice, and the crust that came out was fine. That is the part nobody in that room could deal with. It was fine. Any 28-year-old in that town would have eaten it and said nothing at all. Dane Williamson came in Friday at 1. He was in Erie for something else, he made a point of saying so, and he ordered a plain cheese, which is what a man orders when he intends to taste something. Jacob ran it himself. Dane ate 1 slice and 2/3 of a second. Then he folded his napkin and talked to Cain for 11 minutes about market positioning in secondary metros pleasantly at length without saying one word about the pizza. Cain walked him out to his car. When he came back in, he stood in the middle of the dining room for a second, and Jacob, who was at the pass, said he looked like a man who has just been told a diagnosis in language he could not follow. Saturday Paisley had a solution. There is an outfit in Milwaukee that sells a cultured starter concentrate to bakeries, foil pouch. It is a real product, and there is nothing wrong with it, and half the places you have eaten at this year use something like it. She had already priced it, $240 a case, tab open on her phone. And Cain said, no. Jacob was 6 feet away, rolling silverware, and heard the whole thing. Paisley asked him why. And here is where the account gets thin, because Cain did not have an answer. He started one. He said, because it's... And then he stopped, and he stood in the middle of his own restaurant with his mouth working, 41 years old, and he could not finish it. It was not on the wall in vinyl lettering. It was somewhere further back than the part of in the talks. Because it's not that, he said finally. Paisley waited for the rest of it. There was no rest of it. She put her phone away and said all right and went back to the office, and I do not think either of them understood what had just happened. Sunday morning, Cain came in at 7, which he had not done in a year, and he took the jar out of the walk-in. He carried it to the sink. Jacob says he stood there holding it a while. Then he took the lid off and poured it out, and it went slow the way it does when it has gone flat, and he had to shake the jar twice. He set the empty jar on the drain board. Then he stood with both hands on the edge of the sink, and he did not turn the tap on. 30 seconds, Jacob said. Maybe more. Then he ran the water. The piece never ran the way it was supposed to run. Bria Schwartz had been assigned 900 words on a family restaurant modernizing for a new generation, which is a story that writes itself. She went back for one more sit-down with Paisley to fill the holes. Late afternoon, the office behind the kitchen, the two of them across a desk. I know what was said in that room because Bria told me months later and because she still had the notebook. The first 8 questions were the ones you would expect. Concept timeline, what stays, what goes, how do you honor the legacy, while Paisley was good at all 8. She had answers that sounded like answers instead of slogans, which is rarer than people think, and twice she said something Bria underlined because it was sharp. Question 9 was about her father. Not an ambush. Bria had it in her list from the beginning because profiles need a person in them, and she asked it flatly. Your family had a place too, didn't they? In Warren. And Paisley said yes. She said her father had a sandwich shop on Pennsylvania Avenue for 22 years. She said he made his own bread until the end. She said he was very traditional and did not add anything to it, and Bria, who is good, did not fill the silence. So Paisley filled it herself. She said, he kept the same menu for 19 years. There were 4 sandwiches on it when I was born, and there were 4 sandwiches on it when the bank took the building. He used to say that changing it would be disrespecting my grandmother. A pause. She died in 1981. I never met her. Bria wrote that down. He lived in a rented room above a hardware store for the last 6 years of his life, Paisley said, and he was still saying it. Still saying it. Then she moved her water glass about an inch and said, anyway, next. That is the whole exchange. 9 sentences. In 9 sentences, that woman gave away the entire architecture of herself and then asked for the next question. I want to say something here that I have thought hard about. She is not wrong. That is the part that has cost me sleep. There is a man buried in Warren, Pennsylvania, who starved, holding on to 4 sandwiches and a promise to a woman his daughter never met, and Paisley Golden watched that happen from the time she was 7 until she was 17, and she came out of it with one conviction. That sentiment is a luxury good, and the people who can least afford it buy the most of it. She is not wrong. She is only half right. But the half she has, she came by honestly, and it cost her a father. Bria asked her one more question after that, and it was not on the list. She put a sheet of paper on the desk, a printout from the paper's own archive, 9 years old, a Sunday feature about family restaurants going under in the northern tier. Photo across 3 columns taken inside a dining room. Samson's. The counter. My counter. 9 people in the frame, most of them blurred. Second stool from the left in focus, a young woman in a coat with a notebook open in front of her and a pen in her hand.
Is that you?
Bria said. Paisley looked at it for exactly 2 seconds. Bria was watching the clock on the wall behind her without meaning to, and she is certain about the 2 seconds. Then she said yes. You were doing consulting work up here? Market research. I was 27. This is 4 years before you met Cain. 3.5. Bria did not ask the next one. She told me later she had it right there and could not make herself put it in the air because she was not sure what she would be accusing anybody of. So instead, she asked the softest version. She said, "What did you think of the place back then?" And Paisley Golden said, "I liked the building." 4 words. Not the food, not the family, not the name, not the ovens my father put in with his brother-in-law over a weekend in 1962. The building. Bria closed the notebook and thanked her and gathered her coat, and Paisley walked her out through the dining room and held the door and was gracious about it and asked after her drive. Then she came back and sat down at the desk. There were 3 things on it: a stapler, a coffee cup, and the printout that Bria had left behind. She squared them up. Stapler cup paper, all 3 aligned to the front edge of the desk, evenly spaced, the way she does. The way she has done since she was a girl in a room above a hardware store where nothing was ever square and nothing was ever going to be. Bria Schwartz did not go home. She went across State Street to the coffee place on the corner, the one with 4 tables and a window, because she had 40 minutes before she had to file and because she wanted to write the top of it while the room was still in her head. She got a seat by the glass. From that window, you can see the whole front of the restaurant and the 6 angled parking spots and the alley that runs back toward the loading bay. It was 5:10 and getting dark the way it does in that town in the last week of winter. Not a sunset, just a slow removal. Paisley came out at 17 past. Bria noticed her because you notice motion, and then she kept noticing her, and she has been a reporter for 11 years, and she knows the difference between watching somebody and watching somebody. She watched her. Paisley got into a gray sedan in the second spot. She put her bag on the passenger seat. She pulled the door shut, and she put her hands on the wheel. Then, nothing. Bria wrote 3 sentences of her lead and looked up, and the car had not moved. She fixed the second sentence and looked up again, and it still had not moved. There was no exhaust from the pipe. The engine was not running. It was 31 degrees out, and the woman was sitting in a cold car on State Street with her hands at 10 and 2. Bria stopped writing. At some point, Paisley took out her phone. Bria could see the light of it come up on the underside of her chin, which is a thing you can see from 60 feet away in a dark car and cannot see from 4 feet away in a lit room. She held it for a while. Her thumb moved small movements, the kind you make going down a list rather than typing. Then it stopped. She sat there with the phone in her hand and the light on her face, and she did not lift it to her ear, and she did not put it down. Bria told me she could not say how long. She thought a minute, maybe more. She said the thing she remembers is that Paisley's face did not do anything at all. It was not crying and it was not angry. It was the face of somebody reading a name. Then the light went off. Not put away. Off. She had pressed the side of it and her hand came down into her lap and the car went dark again. Some of this I only know because of what happened afterward. 9 weeks later, in a different room, in circumstances I am not ready to tell you about yet, I learned that Paisley Golden still had her father's number in her phone. He died in April of the year she turned 32. She never deleted it. It sits between a dry cleaner in Warren and a woman named Golden Mom who has been in a facility outside Meadville since 2019 and who no longer uses a telephone. That is the list her thumb was going down. Bria did not write any of it. She had a notebook open in front of her and a woman in her viewfinder, and it was arguably relevant to the piece, and she closed the notebook and turned it face down and went back to her lead. I asked her why when she eventually told me. She thought about it for longer than the question seemed to need. She said, because she wasn't at work. Out in the car, Paisley sat for a while longer. Then she reached forward and moved 2 things on the dashboard. a parking pass, and a tube of something until they were parallel to the vents and evenly spaced. She did it without appearing to notice she was doing it. She started the engine. She backed out of the angled spot, and she waited for a truck, and she went north on State toward the lake, with her headlights coming on automatically the way they do. 6 blocks from there, in a house on Sassafras, on the kitchen table between a fruit bowl and a stack of mail, an accordion folder with a rubber band around it had been sitting since Sunday. 4 days. Nobody had moved it. Nobody had opened it. The rubber band had gone slightly slack the way they do in a warm room, and it had slipped down off the corner and it was resting on the flap. Dane Williamson flew in on a Thursday, and he brought a lawyer. That is the whole story, if you want it in one line. He brought a lawyer, and my son did not, and everything that happened in the next 40 minutes came out of that one asymmetry. Zion called me at 9 that morning. He had it from the title company, who had gotten a routine records request the day before, which is the sort of thing that tells a certain kind of man that a certain kind of transaction is being prepared. They're signing a franchise development agreement, he said, or they think they are, today. 11 o'clock. The restaurant's closed for it. I was at the window on West 8th with a cup of tea going cold. Down on the street, a man was chipping ice off his windshield with a credit card which never works, and which everybody in that town has tried. "You could call him," Zion said. Second time he had offered. How long would it take? 30 seconds. You'd say 4 words, he would not sign anything today, and the 2 of you would be in a room by Friday. I watched the man with the credit card give up and start the engine and sit waiting for the defroster, which is what he should have done at the beginning. Understand what I was choosing. I have been given more credit for this than I deserve, and I have also been called some things. I was not protecting a trademark. Nobody was going to take it. I could have called at 9:05 and stopped the entire afternoon, and the cost of stopping it would have been that my son would have learned one more time that a thing had been fixed before it reached him. 41 years of that. Every one of them meant well. No, I said. Dane came in at 11 with the lawyer, a woman from Cleveland with a rolling case, and they sat at table 4 with the paperwork. Jacob was in the building because Jacob is always in the building. The pass-through window is open, and sound carries in an empty dining room the way it does not in a full one. It went well for 20 minutes. That is the part people leave out. Dane liked the concept, the numbers worked there, was talk about a second location in Ashtabula. Then the lawyer said she needed to complete the intellectual property schedule before signature. Standard. Boring. She had a form with blanks on it, registration number, class, registrant, chain of assignment. She asked Cain for the trademark registration number. He said the mark was registered, and he would get her the paperwork. She said she just needed the number, she could look it up if he had the exact wording. And Dane Williamson, who was sitting right there with a laptop open in front of him, and who had been doing this for 22 years, said, "I'll pull it, that is all." 4 words, said pleasantly by a man being helpful. He typed. It takes about 11 seconds. Anybody in the world can search that database for free at any hour of the day, which is the part I want you to hold on to. Everything that was about to happen had been sitting in a public government file for 31 years, available to anyone who typed 6 letters. Nobody had ever typed them. Dane read the screen. Then he read it again. Then he turned the laptop around on the table so it faced Cain, which is the same gesture Kylie Shaw had made a month earlier in a bank on Peach Street, and I have thought about the fact that 2 different people in 2 different buildings both decided that my son should read it himself. Sampson's. Serial number registered September 1994. Class 43. Registrant Edwin Sampson, an individual. Assignment history, none. Cain looked at it for a while. The lawyer from Cleveland asked in a perfectly professional voice whether there was a license agreement in place. Cain said, "It's the family name." And she said, "I understand. Is there a license agreement in place?" That is the sentence Jacob heard through the pass-through and repeated to me twice. It is not a cruel sentence. There is nothing in it. It took the whole building down. Dane closed the laptop. He did not stand up right away. He sat for a second with his hand flat on the lid, and Jacob said he looked genuinely sorry, which surprised me when I heard it, and has not surprised me since. Then he stood and picked up his coat, and he said one thing on his way out. "Call me when you own your own name." That evening, a car parked across the street from the chiropractor's office on West 8th and sat there with the engine off. I was at the window. I had been at the window most of the day. I could see him through the windshield, under the streetlight, both hands on the wheel. 41 years old, sitting outside a building he had never been inside. He stayed 11 minutes. Then he pulled out and drove away. And I stood there in a dark room over a chiropractor's office with a cold cup of tea in my hand, and I did not go down, and he did not come up. And that is the closest the two of us got for another 3 weeks. He opened the folder at 1 in the morning, 11 days after Dane Williamson walked out, and he did not open it to find out the truth. He opened it looking for a weapon. I want to be careful with that sentence because it is the harshest one I will say about my son. He had spent 11 days finding out that the bank would not restructure, that a second mortgage on the house would not carry it, and that a man in Cleveland does not return calls. By the time he cut the rubber band off that folder, he was not asking what happened. He was asking, who did this to me? That is not a good state of mind for reading, but it is a very focused one. Paisley was up with him. Kitchen table, both laptops open, a legal pad between them. He read the note first. 12 pages, and he read all 12, which is more than he had ever done. And by page 4, he had the vocabulary. And by page 9, he had found the guarantee writer referenced by attachment number. Page 13 is a signature page, his. And page 14 is the guarantee. He did not turn to it. I have had this explained to me by 2 lawyers, and I still find it difficult, so I will tell it plainly. The note is the borrower's promise. The guarantee is a separate instrument signed by a different party on a different day, and it lives behind the signature page like a room behind a door in a house you have lived in for 15 months. He was looking for a clause that would help him. There was no clause on page 14. There was a name. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, Paisley found the thing they were looking for. She had been searching while he read, and she is very good at finding things. And what she found was a doctrine called promissory estoppel. The shape of it is this. If a person makes a promise and you reasonably rely on it, and you are damaged when they withdraw it, a court may enforce the promise even if there was no contract. It is a real doctrine. Zion later described the application of it here as, and I am quoting, ambitious. He told you he'd back you, she said. 16 months ago. Verbally. He didn't say that. What did he say? Cain sat there. I have wondered what he was reaching for in that pause. I think he was trying to remember an actual sentence out of an actual afternoon, and finding there was not one. What there was a kitchen in April, a letter held up like a caught fish, 3 seconds of a man standing with his mouth open, and then, "That's great," and a handshake with a sweating hand. He shook my hand. Cain said. "Okay," Paisley said. "That's something." And then she said the thing. She did not say it cruelly. She was tired. It was after 2, and she said it the way you say a thing that you have believed so long you have stopped hearing it as an opinion. Look, Cain, he was going to lose this place anyway. He was 72 years old and running an 11% food cost on a menu he hadn't touched since Bush. I just made it faster. Cain looked up at her. That is all he did. This part I have from Cain himself, much later in a room with clocks in it, and he told it against his own interest, which is how I know it is true. He looked at his wife across a kitchen table at 2 in the morning, and he did not say anything, and something happened behind his face that he could not name at the time, and could name later. She said, "What?" He said, "Nothing." And that was it. That is the entire fracture. No shouting, no accusation, nothing you could put in a summary. A man looked at his wife for about a second and a half, and something in the floor of that marriage gave, quietly, the way old joists do. And neither of them did anything about it. And as far as I know, neither of them ever has. At 3 in the morning, he drove to the restaurant to use the copier in the office because the one at the house had been out of toner since Christmas. He made 3 sets, one for the lawyer he had found on Peach Street, one for the file, one for himself. The office copier has a feeder on top that pulls the pages through and stacks them face down in the tray, and it makes a sound every sheet that plastic clack. Anybody who has worked in a small business hears in their sleep. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. He stood there with his arms folded, watching the counter number climb at 3 in the morning in an empty building 41 years old. Page 12. Page 13. Page 14 went through the feeder at 3:11 in the morning. It was in the machine for about a second and a half. Then the roller took it and turned it over and set it face down in the output tray, on top of 13 other sheets in a stack he picked up and squared against the desk without looking at, and put in a manila envelope and sealed. Zion man calls on the hour. If he has something at 9:50, he waits 10 minutes. He called at 10. "Mr. Sampson," he said. 31 years. He calls me Edwin when it is good news and Mr. Sampson when it is not, and he has never once acknowledged doing it, and I have never once asked him to stop. I sat down on the edge of the bed in a rented room with the phone against my ear. "Go ahead." A complaint was filed yesterday in the Court of Common Pleas, Erie County, Civil Division. Plaintiff is Cain Sampson. Defendant is Edwin Sampson. A pause, 1 second, no more. "I got it from the clerk's office at 8:40 this morning." What does he want? $190,000 and costs. The theory is promissory estoppel. The allegation is that you made an oral commitment to stand behind the loan, that he relied on that commitment to his detriment, and that your withdrawal caused the damage. Will it work? No. He said it without any pleasure. It will not work, and that is not the same as saying this will be easy or quick, or that it will not cost you something. It will not work because you never made an oral commitment. You signed a written instrument and never told him, and a promise he did not know existed is not a promise he can have relied on. I looked at the windowsill. Walnut ledger handkerchief. "There's more," Zion said. "Go on." Paragraph 14. He stopped there. I have thought since that he stopped because he needed a second, and Zion man does not need seconds. "I'm going to read it exactly," he said. "Then I'm going to read it again, because the first time you will hear the whole thing, and I want you to hear the actual words. Read it." Plaintiff further avers that the defendant's recent conduct, including the unexplained abandonment of his residence and place of business, the unilateral withdrawal of long-standing financial support, and a pattern of financial decisions inconsistent with his prior behavior over 5 decades, raises a good faith question as to the defendant's present capacity to manage his own affairs, and plaintiff respectfully requests that the court consider whether an evaluation is warranted. The radiator was not on. That is the detail my head kept. It came on at 6 and went off at 10, and it had just gone off, and the room was making the ticking noise they make while they cool. "Again," I said. He read it again. He read it slower the second time, and when he got to the words, "present capacity to manage his own affairs," he did not put any weight on them, which I was grateful for. I did not say anything for a while. I want to be exact about what that felt like, because it is the reason for what I did afterward, and I am not proud of all of it. It was not the money. I had already decided about the money. It was not being sued either, which happens to men in business and which I had been through twice. It was the word capacity. There is a fear that arrives at a certain age and never leaves the house again. It moves in around 70 for most men I know. You forget a word in the middle of a sentence and you get it back 4 seconds later, and everybody moves on, and you spend the rest of the afternoon with your hand on that 4 seconds. You count your change twice. You say, "I know what I'm doing," to people who have not asked. And the one thing that keeps that fear in its room, instead of walking around loose in your house, is that nobody who loves you has ever said it out loud. My son had put it in a court filing. Typed, numbered, paragraph 14. Stamped, docketed, a public record anybody in Erie County can walk in and read for as long as that building stands, Edwin Zion said. "Are you there?" "I'm here." Say something to me. I stood up. My knee did what it does. I walked 4 steps to the window and looked down at West 8th, where a woman was walking a dog that did not want to be out, and neither of them was in any hurry, 11 feet below a man who had just been asked in writing whether he still had a mind. "One question," I said. "Ask it." Did he write that paragraph, or did somebody write it for him? Zion did not answer. I waited. He is a lawyer with a document in front of him, and there is not a question on this earth he does not have an answer for, and he did not answer. "Zion, I heard you." "Then answer it." "I'm not going to speculate about who drafted a pleading," he said, and his voice had changed. And I have known that voice 31 years, and it had never done that before. "I will tell you, I have read a great many complaints, and this one has a sentence that reads like it was written by somebody who has read a lot of complaints, and one sentence that does not." "Which one?" "Come to the office," he said, "today. There's something I should have shown you a while ago." And I heard a drawer open on his end of the line. What came out of the drawer was not what I expected. I had spent the drive over building a picture of it, something about Paisley something, with a name on it, some piece of paper that would let me put that paragraph on her instead of on him. I am telling you that because I want you to know what I was hoping for on Peach Street that afternoon. Zion put a single sheet on the desk. "This is not about the complaint," he said. "It came through the payroll service. We do the quarterly filings for the LLC we have since '96, and we get copies of separations. It was a termination letter. Employee Jacob Palacios. Position kitchen lead. Effective date 3 weeks old. Reason for separation 1 line, and the line was not aligned with the direction of the brand. Signature Paisley Golden." I read it 4 times. On the 4th time, the room got very specific, the way it does the brass lamp and the chain-link fence out the window and a coffee ring on Zion's blotter that had been there since Thanksgiving. 3 weeks, I said. 3 weeks Thursday. He called me a week ago. I know. He called me a week ago at 6:15 about a jar, and I could hear the deck ovens coming up behind him. Zion did not say anything. He slid the desk phone toward me, which he has done maybe 5 times in 31 years, and it means he wants me to do it now, while I still have my nerve up. Jacob picked up on the 2nd ring. "Edwin, when did she fire you?" There was a sound on his end. A car door. He was outside somewhere. "Who told you?" "That's not the question I asked." "The 11th, he said. "And you've been going in since?" "Yeah, every day." "Not Sundays," he said. "They're closed Sundays now." I put my hand over my eyes. I was sitting in a lawyer's office with a lamp on, and I put my hand over my eyes like a man walking out of a matinee. "Jacob, are they paying you?" He did not answer. I want to be precise about what happened next, because it is a small thing, and it has stayed with me longest out of that entire month. There was a silence on the phone. And in the silence, I heard automatic doors open and close, that double sigh they make, and then the sound of a parking lot, which is a different sound from a street. He was at the hospital. His wife started her treatments in February, and Thursdays are her long day. And he was standing in the lot at St. Vincent with a phone against his ear, unpaid 3 weeks, going in at 4:40 every morning to fire ovens for a restaurant that had let him go. "Jacob, it's not their fault about the money," he said. "It's a clean separation. They don't owe me anything. I want to say that." "Then why?" "Because the ovens need to come up at 4:40, he said, "and nobody else knows that." That is a man's entire position stated in 1 sentence, standing in a hospital parking lot. That's not a reason. It's the reason I've got. You have a wife who is sick, and you are working for nothing at 4 in the morning for people who put you out. "So did you?" he said. He said it quietly. He is not a man who scores points, and he was not scoring one. He said it the way you say a thing that has been sitting in your chest and finally has somewhere to go. Then he said, 51 years, Edwin, twice a day. Nobody ever paid you for the jar." Then he said he had to go because she was coming out. I sat there with the phone in my hand after he hung up. Zion took it back and set it in the cradle and did not say anything. because here is what I had just heard, and it took me the drive home and most of the night to get all the way to it. My father did not tell me I did a good job for 24 years, and he had his reasons, and he took them into a walk-in on a Sunday morning in February. I did not tell my son I was standing behind him, and I had my reasons, and I was still holding them. And Jacob did not tell me his wife was sick, or that he had been let go, or that he was going in for free at 4:40, because if he had told me, I would have had to choose, and he did not want me to have to choose. 3 men. 3 good men, if you will let me include myself, and I am not sure today that I will. Every one of us doing the same thing, which is loving somebody quietly and calling it decency, and every one of us leaving the other person to find out too late to say anything back. I drove home. I did not turn the radio on. I sat down at the little table in that rented kitchen with the ledger in front of me and the walnut and the folded handkerchief, and I took the pencil out of my shirt pocket. And I sat there with it in my hand, and I did not write anything. I went back to Peach Street the next afternoon because Zion asked me to bring the ledger. He had asked for it on the phone that morning in a voice that did not explain, and I put it under my arm and drove over without asking why, which is what 31 years buys you. He cleared the desk. Not tidied, cleared. The blotter, the lamp base, the pen cup, all of it went onto the credenza behind him. And then there was nothing on that desk but wood. "Open it," he said. The cover is cloth dark green, gone black at the corners, and the spine has been re-glued twice, once by my father with hide glue around 1970, and once by a bindery in Meadville that charged me $60 and did a worse job. Page 1 is dated the 4th of April 1961. $400. Opening float cash box. In pencil, in that hand with the 4 made the European way because his mother taught him and she never learned to write in English at all. That is where the whole thing starts. $400 in a cigar box in a shoe repair on State Street. "Keep going," Zion said. 1968. Second oven used out of Cleveland. $900. And in the corner of that page in the bottom right, where he always put it, the running total, $1,300. 1974, the roof on the north side, $2,200 running total, $3,500. 81, the walk-in compressor, $1,600. 5,100. 86, the hood system, because the city changed the code and gave us 4 months, $4,800. 9,900. 92, resurfacing the lot, $3,100. 13,000 even. And then a page in 1998, in my handwriting instead of his, that says, estate costs, father 5,000, 18,000. That is the entire capital history of Sampson's from 1961 to the day he died. $18,000 in pencil over 37 years by a man who could not have told you what amortization means, and who never owed anybody $1 he had not written down. I sat there with my hand flat on that page for a while. "Turn to the back," Zion said. I knew what was in the back. I had put it there. There are 3 pages at the end of that ledger that are not about the restaurant at all, and my father never saw them, and they are in my handwriting, and I started them in the fall of 1998 because I did not know where else a thing like that goes. 1998. Culinary School, Buffalo, 1 semester. 4,100. He left in December. He did not fail out. He came home for Thanksgiving and did not go back, and when I asked, he said the program was a joke, and I said all right, and that was the whole conversation about $4,100, and the only formal training my son ever had. Running total, 4,100. 2006, first car balance after the trade-in. 3,400. He was 22 and he had $200 of his own in it. 7,500. 2011. Rent 11 months. 7,150. That was the year the agency job went, and he did not tell anybody for 6 weeks. 14,650. 2019. Back taxes 12,000. 26,650. And then a gap of 5 years, and then the last line in the book. I did not write it in April when I signed it. I wrote it 11 days before the relaunch in Zion's office on the same afternoon I put my name in pencil on 7 pages, and then went over it in ink. The last line says guarantee first keystone, 190,000. And under it, in the bottom right corner, where my father always put it, the running total in pencil, 216,650. I looked at that number for a long time. Not because it was large. It is not large, not the way people mean when they say large. There are men in that county who spend that on a boat. My father put 18,000 into a building over 37 years, and it fed 4 families. I looked at it because of where it sat. $18,000 in the front of that book entered in pencil by a man who never told his son he did a good job. 216,000 in the back of the same book entered in pencil by that son about his son in a hand that has come to look so much like the first hand that a stranger would not separate them. Same ledger, same pencil, same corner of the same page. Zion had not said anything in several minutes. "Edwin," he said, "read the last line loud." "I've read it." "Out loud," he said. "Once."
And I do not know why that was the thing out of all of it, but I put my finger on the line the way you do when the print is small, and I opened my mouth to read a number I had written myself 6 weeks earlier in that same room. I got 4 words out.
Guarantee first keystone. And then my voice did a thing it has not done in front of another human being since 1998 in a funeral home, when a woman I had known since grade school asked if I wanted to say something about my father, and I said no. It went. That is the only way I know how to describe it. There was a word coming, and the machinery that makes words quit on the way. I sat there with my finger on the line. Zion did not move. He did not say, "Take your time." He did not do that thing people do where they get busy with a paperclip to give you privacy. He sat with his hands folded and let it happen in front of him, which is the hardest thing to do for somebody, and the only useful one. When it came back, it did not come back as the number. 41 years, I said. My voice was not right. I could hear it not being right, and I kept going anyway, which I have never done before or since. 41 years, Michael. I called him by a name that is not his, which I did not notice until months later, and have never explained. And he never once asked me where the flour came from. That is the sentence. My son ate out of that building for 41 years. He ate off that ledger. He went to Buffalo on it, and drove on it, and lived in an apartment on it, and stood in front of a newspaper on it, and not one time in 4 decades did he turn around and ask the simplest question a person can ask. Where does this come from? Not thank you. I have never needed thank you, and I want that understood, because people hear this story and think it is about gratitude, and it is not. Thank you costs nothing. Where does this come from is a different thing. It is the question a man asks when he has started to understand that things arrive because somebody carried them. He never asked it. And the reason he never asked it, and I am the only person on earth who can say this with authority, is that I built a world for him in which it never occurred to anyone that anything had to be carried. I stood up. I did not decide to. My body did it the way a body does at 73, and I was on my feet in the middle of that office with nowhere to go and nothing to do with my hands. And I took out my handkerchief and I started cleaning his desk. It is cotton white, and my wife folded it into a square in the last week of her life because she was in a chair by the window and wanted a job, and folding was a job she could still do. It has been in my left hip pocket every day since. I have never once used it. I used it on Zion Mann's desk. There was nothing on that desk. He had cleared it himself an hour earlier. It was bare wood with a ledger on it, and I went at one spot near the front edge about the size of a saucer, and I wiped it, and I wiped it again, and then I wiped it a third time with my whole weight behind my shoulder, as if something was actually there. Zion did not stop me. He watched a 73-year-old man polish a clean desk with his dead wife's handkerchief, and he did not say a word. And I have thought since that I was very lucky in the lawyer I chose in 1994. Something came out of my shirt pocket while I was bent over. It went down flat on the desk with a small sound. Manila, the small kind brown along the flap. For Edwin. When the time comes. I looked at it lying there. I picked it up between 2 fingers. I turned it over once. I brushed it off with my thumb, although there was nothing on it, and I put it back in my shirt pocket next to the pencil, and I sat down. Outside the window, a truck went past in the alley behind the tire shop, low gear, and somebody in another office on that floor laughed at something. The radiator came on. I folded the handkerchief. Not the way she folded it. I do not know how she folded it. I got it into a square that was close, and I put it back in my left hip pocket, and I put both hands on my knees. Zion let it be quiet for a while after that. Then he said, "There's one more thing." I did not look up. "It isn't in the ledger," he said. "It's a page out of a document your son filed with the court himself 11 days ago as an exhibit. He attached it. He attached it because he wanted the judge to see the loan." He put his hand on a folder that had been sitting under the credenza the entire time. "Edwin," he said, "it's page 14. He put it on the desk face up and slid it across, a photocopy with the shadow line down the left edge where the original had lifted off the glass. Court exhibit stamp in the corner, filed by the plaintiff. My son had walked into the Court of Common Pleas with a sealed envelope and handed a clerk the thing that ended his case on purpose because he wanted a judge to see how much money he had borrowed. Peach Street to the courthouse is 9 blocks, and he would have carried it under his arm. The top of the page says guarantee. Capital letters centered, the way those things are. Then a paragraph I will not put you through. Then the operative sentence that the undersigned unconditionally guarantees the full and prompt payment of all obligations of the borrower under the note. Then a signature line. Edwin Sampson. In ink gone over pencil, which does not show on a photocopy, but which I know is under there because I sat in that same room and did what I have always done. Dated the 14th of April. And under the signature in a box in the bank's own printing, a note from the credit committee. 6 words. Approval contingent solely upon third-party guarantee. Solely. Not partly. Not in combination with. The bank had looked at my son's numbers on his 3rd attempt and written down in their own form that the only reason the answer was yes was that a 72-year-old man had come in on a Thursday and put his name on a piece of paper. I sat with it for a while. Zion let me, because here is what it meant. Cain had never read it. That was not a theory anymore. It was proof of the strongest kind, because it came from his own hand. No man who has read page 14 files page 14. The document he attached to prove I owed him something was the document that proved I had already given it. 15 months. 15 months of a man walking around a town of 90,000 people, believing he had gone into a bank 3 times and been told no, no, and yes, and that the yes had been about him. I have tried to imagine what that yes felt like. I think it felt like the floor coming up under him for the first time in his life. I think he stood in a parking lot and felt like a man and drove to a kitchen to tell his father. And I stood in that kitchen with my mouth open for 3 seconds and let him have it. I put the page down. "That's the case," I said. "That ends it." "That ends it," Zion said. "The complaint dies the moment I attach his own exhibit to a preliminary objection. A week. There will be no hearing. Then we're done." "No," Zion said. "Look at the bottom." I looked at the bottom. At the foot of the page in the margin, there is a handwritten line. Small, neat ballpoint, the way somebody writes when they are recording something for a file rather than saying it to a person. Guarantor requests borrower not be informed. Noted per compliance. KS and a date. The 14th of April, the same afternoon. I read it 3 times. And on the 3rd, I stopped in the middle and did not get to the end. Because that is not the bank. That is not policy, and it is not some rule about disclosure Kylie Shaw was following. That is a woman at a desk writing down what the man across from her had just asked her to do. I asked them not to tell him. Not the bank's idea. Mine. I sat in a chair on Peach Street on the 14th of April, and I signed a page, and then I opened my mouth and I asked a stranger to keep my son from finding out that his father was the reason he had been approved. I had told myself a story about that for 16 months. The story was that a gift you announce is not a gift, it is an invoice, that a man of 41 needs to believe he did it himself, that I was protecting his dignity, I told it to myself so many times it wore a path.
And sitting there with his handwriting in front of me and a woman's ballpoint under it, I heard the other version for the first time. And it took about 2 seconds, the way the true thing always does.
I did not want him to know because I wanted to be the only one who knew. I wanted my son to walk around in a life I was holding up, believing he was standing on his own, and I wanted to be the man in the room who could see the whole thing. That is not protection. There is a word for it, and it is not a kind word, and I have made myself use it since. I put both hands flat on the desk. Zion Man waited until I looked up, and then he asked me a question that I have decided was the most important thing anybody said to me in the whole of it. He did not say, "Are you going to tell him?" He said, "Edwin, which part are you going to tell him?" There are 2 versions of that conversation, and I had both of them ready. Version 1 is clean. I sit my son down and put a page in front of him and say, "I sign this. The bank would not have given it to you without me, and I withdrew it because you needed to feel the weight of something once in your life." Every word of that is true, and every word of it makes me a man who did a hard thing for a good reason. Version 2 has one more sentence in it. I sat in Zion's office for a while. If I only tell him the first part, I said, what does he walk away with? He walks away knowing his father carried him and then stopped. Zion does not soften things, which is true and survivable and puts you in the better chair. And the second part? The second part is that you asked a bank employee to make sure he never found out. That is not the same story, Edwin. That one has a man in it who wanted to be the only one who knew. He took his glasses off. You're asking whether you have to say it. I am not going to answer that. Outside, somebody was backing a truck up in the alley, and the beeper was going. Here is the thing I kept arriving at. For 16 months, I had believed that saying it out loud would turn a gift into a debt. That was the whole architecture. That is why my father never told me I did a good job. I think because he had the same idea, and he got it from somewhere too. 3 generations of men in one family all convinced that love has to be silent to stay clean. And what I built with all that silence was a boy who did not know the ground was being held up, a man who could not ask where the flower came from, and a lawsuit with a paragraph in it about whether I still had a mind. A gift you do not name is not a gift. It is a trap with a soft lining, and I set it every day for 41 years, and I called it decency the entire time. Both parts, I said. Zion put his glasses back on and wrote something on a legal pad, and I could not see what it was, and I did not ask, and it is one of about 4 things from that spring I still wonder about. The complaint went away 11 days later. I am not going to spend your time on it. Zion filed a preliminary objection with the exhibit attached. Cain's attorney called the next afternoon, and there was a discontinuance signed by the end of the following week. No hearing. No judge ever read paragraph 14 out loud. Cain never sat in a courtroom, and neither did I. I have been told by people who mean well that I let him off. I did not let him off. A dismissal on the pleadings is not mercy, it is arithmetic. He filed a document that destroyed his own case, and the case died of it, and there is nothing in that for me to be generous about. The only decision I made was afterward. I went home to West 8th and sat down at that little table with the ledger and the walnut and the folded handkerchief on the sill and the light going in the window the way it does at 5 o'clock in the last week of March when you can finally tell the difference. I took the pencil out of my shirt pocket. I have carried that pencil every working day of my life, and I had not written a word with it in 8 weeks. I turned it over twice. Then I opened the ledger to the back and found the last line I had written, and I did not add to it. I closed the ledger. Then I took a sheet of paper out of the drawer and I wrote to my son. In pencil. It took me 4 hours, and I will tell you what was in it when I tell you the rest, because he read it before I said any of this to his face, and it matters what order things happened in. When it was done, I folded it in 3. Then I took out my phone, which I do not like and do not use well, and I found his name in it, and I typed 7 words with 1 finger. Beaumont's, Charles Street, Saturday, 11 o'clock. Please. I read it 4 times. I took out the word please and put it back in. Then I sent it. He did not answer that night. He answered at 6:40 the next morning, which meant he had been awake, and the whole message said, "Where is that?" And I did not tell him. I wrote back, "You'll find it. Look for the clock in the window." Because there was one more thing that had to happen before Saturday, and it was not going to happen in a lawyer's office, or a restaurant, or a courtroom. And I had been carrying it in my shirt pocket for 8 weeks, 6 inches under my collarbone, brown along the flap with one line on the front, in a hand I would know in a dark room. Ivan Yu has had the same 12 feet of Charles Street since 1987. There is a clock in the window, a wall regulator with a brass pendulum, and it has been there my entire adult life, and it does not run. He keeps it stopped at 10 past 10 because he says that is the face a clock makes when it is smiling, and it brings people in. It has brought in perhaps 4 people. He is 71, and he does not care. Inside there are about 40 of them going at once. You do not hear it as noise. You hear it as a room breathing, dozens of escapements slightly out of phase, and under all of it, the long, slow one from the tall case clock in the corner that he will not sell. I got there at 20 to 11. Cain's car was already in the lot behind the hardware store. He had beaten me by 20 minutes, and he was sitting in it, and I could see the shape of his head through the back window, and I did not over. I went inside instead. Ivan looked up from the bench with the loop still in his eye, which makes him look like a man who has swallowed a telescope, and said, "Edwin, there's a boy in a car out there been sitting 40 minutes. I know. He yours. He's mine." Ivan took the loop out and looked at me a second longer than he needed to, the way men our age do when they are counting something up. "I'll be at the bench," he said. "I got a Hamilton I can be at the bench about all morning." 39 years I have known that man, and that is the most tactful thing anybody has ever done for me. I went to the far end of the counter where the light comes in from the side window, and I took the envelope out of my shirt pocket. 8 weeks I had carried it. 29 years it had sat in a wall safe on Peach Street. I turned my back to the door. I want to be honest about why I did it there and not at home. Because my son was sitting in a car in the lot and there was no more time, and because for 8 weeks I had told myself I would open it when the moment was right, and I had finally understood there was never going to be a right moment. There was only going to be a last one. I got my thumb under the flap. The glue let go without any fight at all. 1 sheet, lined, torn out of something folded in half. 4 lines in pencil. "Edwin, Zion has this. If he ever gives it to you, then the thing I was afraid of has happened, and you were sitting somewhere trying to decide about the boy. I never told you you did good. I know that. I could not do it, and I do not have a reason that holds up. I was wrong not to tell you. Don't be wrong the same way I was. Your father." I stood at that counter with my back to my son, and I read it 4 times. Ivan Yu had a Hamilton apart on green felt 11 feet away, and he did not look up once, and the 40 clocks kept going, and out on Charles Street, the snow melt was running along the gutter toward the drain with that sound it makes in the 3rd week of April. He knew. That is what I could not get past. He wrote it in March of '97, 14 months before he died, and he was not writing about himself. He was writing about a thing he had already watched me start doing. He saw it in me when Cain was 13 years old, and he put it in a wall safe with $20 because he could not say it to my face either. 28 years. I had been waiting 28 years to hear that man say I did good, and he had said it, and it had been 11 blocks away the whole time in a lawyer's safe, and I got it 450 feet from the boy it was about at 73 years of age. I folded it. I put it back in my pocket. Then the bell over the door went. He came in with his hands in his coat and stopped just inside the way you do in a shop you have never been in, and looked around at the walls and did not say anything about them. He had lost weight, 11 or 12 pounds off a man who did not have it, and his jaw was sharp, and the skin under his eyes had that gray that does not come from one bad night. "Dad!" Cain. He came to the counter. He did not sit down on the stool. He stood with about 4 feet between us, and he said, "The lawyer said it's over. The case, it's over." He said I filed the thing that killed it. He almost laughed, and it did not get anywhere. He said in 22 years he's never had that happen. Sit down, I said. He sat down, and I took out the photocopy and turned it around the way Kylie Shaw turns a screen and the way Dane Williamson turned a laptop, because it had come to me twice that spring from people who understood something I was only then learning. There are things a man has to read for himself. I put page 14 on the counter in front of my son. He read it fast at first, skimming, waiting to get to the part that mattered. Then he stopped. I watched his eyes go back to the top of the page and start again, and find the signature line and read the 6 words in the box under it. Approval contingent solely upon third-party guarantee. He put one hand on the counter. The clocks went on. That is the thing I remember about those minutes. The room did not have the decency to be quiet, and the tall case clock in the corner came around and made its noise on the half hour while my son was finding out what his life had been built on. He did not say anything for a long time. 14th of April, he said finally. Yes. The letter came on the 15th. He was still looking at the page. I came to the kitchen on the 15th. You did. You already knew. I already knew. He put both hands flat on the counter on either side of the page and lowered his head and stayed like that, and Ivan Yu turned a screw 11 feet away and did not look up. I said the first part. I told him the bank had turned him down twice and would have again. I told him I went in on a Thursday and signed a guarantee and that the yes he got was mine. I told him I pulled it in January because he had never, in 41 years, had to hold the weight of anything, and I had finally understood that I was the reason. All of that is true, and all of it is the version where I come out all right. Then I said the second part. There's a line at the bottom of that page, I said. Read it. He read it. Guarantor requests borrower not be informed. That was me, I said. That was not the bank, and it was not policy. I sat in a chair on Peach Street and I asked a woman I had never met to make sure you never found out. He looked up. For 16 months I told myself I did that so it wouldn't feel like a debt. My voice was all right. I had practiced it and it held. That was not the reason. The reason was that I wanted to be the only one who knew. He did not say anything. I wanted you walking around thinking you did it yourself, and I wanted to be the man in the room who could see the whole thing. I have made myself use the word since. The word is pride, Cain, not yours, mine. The bell over the door went. Jacob Palacios came in with a paper grocery sack held against his chest with both arms, and he did not say hello and did not look at either of us. He came the length of that shop, set the sack on the counter, and took the top of it down. A quart jar. Wire bail. Rubber band around the middle at the fill line. He turned around and went out. The bell went again behind him. Cain looked at the jar, then at me. It's off the original, I said. I split it 8 weeks before the relaunch and gave it to Jacob. It got fed twice a day the whole time. It's the same one your grandfather started in April of '61. It is 65 years old, and it is alive. He put his hand near it and did not touch it. Why now? He said. Because it's yours. I killed it. You killed the one in the building, I said. You fed it every day, and you fed it the wrong thing, and you did not know, and nobody told you. I had to stop for a second. That is exactly what I did to you. I am not going to explain it any better than that. Then I took the paper package out of my coat. Brown paper creased flat with the heel of my hand. His name on the front in pencil. One word. He opened it on the counter. The piece of walnut came out first thumb-sized off the bottom edge of a sign his grandfather cut from a plank in 1960. He turned it over twice and did not ask what it was. And I have decided since that he knew. Then the letter. 4 pages, pencil, 4 hours. He read it standing up. I am not going to give you all of it. Some of it is between him and me. But I will tell you the part he stopped on, because I watched him stop and his chin went down and came back up. A gift you do not name is not a gift. It is a trap with a soft lining. I said it every day for 41 years and called it decency, and the man who taught me to do it wrote me a letter in '97 telling me not to, and I did not get it until this morning. He got to the end. Your father, Edwin. He folded it back along my creases. He was not fast about it. Then he said, "Thank you, Dad," and I could not say anything. I want to be clear about this because it is the last true thing I have to tell you. My son said thank you to me in a watch shop on Charles Street, which is the thing I had waited on for 4 decades, without once admitting I was waiting. And I opened my mouth, and there was nothing in it. I nodded at him. That is all I did. 73 years old, and I nodded at my son the way my father used to look at a clean dining room and nod at the floor. It has not gotten easier since. I want that on the record too. That was 14 months ago. The restaurant is still there. It is smaller than it was, and it is not called Samp anymore. And my son runs it, and he drives a delivery van 3 nights a week to keep the lights on. Paisley moved to Columbus in September. I will not say more about that because there are 2 people in it, and I have only ever spoken to one of them. Jacob Palacios is back on payroll. His wife finished her treatments in June. The jar is in a walk-in on State Street. It gets fed twice a day by a man of 42 who calls me about once a week to ask a question about it, and who has never once asked a question he could have looked up. I do not think I was the hero of this. I want to be plain about that. I was a man who loved his son with both hands over the boy's eyes. I paid for everything and explained nothing, and I called the silence decency, and by the time anybody could see what it had cost, it had already cost it. My father did the same to me, and I resented him for it 28 years, and then I turned around and did it. That is how it works, and how it keeps working, unless somebody in the line stops. So here's what I would say to you, and then I am done. If you are carrying somebody, tell them. Not to collect, not to be thanked. Tell them because a person who does not know the ground is being held can never learn to stand on it. And because the day they find out alone is worse than any day you could have picked. Say it early. Say it while you still have your voice. And if somebody has been carrying you, ask them where the flower came from. Ask this week. Now I want to know what you think, because 2 people in this story believed opposite things, and I have never entirely settled it. Paisley Golden watched her own father starve holding on to a menu he would not change, and she came out of it believing sentiment is a luxury nobody in our position can afford. She said one sentence to my son that I have never been able to answer. He was going to lose it anyway. I just made it faster. She was wrong about my family, but I have lain awake wondering whether she was wrong about hers. Tell me in the comments, was she a woman who tore down something sacred, or a woman who had already seen what happens to people who keep it standing too long? I read them. I read all of them. If this story got somewhere in you, share it with somebody who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Thank you for staying with an old man all the way to the end of it. It means more than you know.